It's been roughly 1 year since I last posted a What's on my Nintendo 3DS video, and the collection has grown and the hardware has been upgraded, so let's see what's on my 3DS. So first off, I now have a blank new 3DS XL. I actually picked this up the day after I filmed that last video about a year ago. I also went ahead and upgraded the microSD card to a 32GB model to hold most of my 3DS library. Pro tip by the way, for those of you watching and don't know, it only costs about 11 bucks to buy a 32GB card on Amazon. This is the biggest card you could use on your 3DS. I highly recommend doing so, that way you can download all the games and demos you could ever want. Now let's start with my physical game copies. I've owned and sold and gave away many of my 3DS games before, like Ocarina of Time and Link Between Worlds, but here are a few games I still own. First off, Star Fox 64 3D. One of my favorite Nintendo 64 games of all time, remade with beautiful new graphics and local multiplayer. I absolutely love this game, and with the release of Star Fox Zero, now's the greatest time to get back into it. I also have Icarus Uprising, one of the best multiplayer games I've ever played on the 3DS. I think this comedic shooter went under the radar for a lot of 3DS owners, so I highly recommend getting a copy. It's by far one of the funniest campaigns I've ever played on the 3DS, and the multiplayer has a lot of similarities with Super Smash Bros. In terms of the controls. Another great pair of multiplayer games I own are Mario Kart 7 and Super Smash Bros. For 3DS. Mario Kart 7 brings the fantastic home console series to the handheld with full 3D graphics and a robust online multiplayer mode. If you love the console games, you'll love this one, and the same can be said with Super Smash Bros. This game is, besides the graphics of course and a game mode or two, exactly the same as the Wii U release. Multiplayer is just as fun and works great. If you don't have a Wii U but you still love Smash Bros, do yourself a favor and pick this game up. I also have one of the best platformers on the 3DS, Super Mario 3D Land, what I consider to be the first real 3D Mario game on a handheld. We had Mario 64 DS before, but this was the first time we had a unique new 3D Mario game for a handheld. The use of the 3D with the platforms is clever and charming, and overall just a very fun time. Majora's Mask 3D was the last physical game I bought myself, and it was just as fun as it was on the N64. Pilot Wings Resort, I honestly don't even remember how I got this game. I don't remember buying it. Maybe someone that really hated it put it in my bag during E3. Sonic Generations was a surprisingly fun title. It wasn't like the console version, it actually had some different levels, and instead of full 3D gameplay, it had sort of a 2.5D gameplay. A really fun Sonic game overall. Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance is one of my favorite games of all time. It's actually being remade for PS4 this year. I also have Fire Emblem Birthright, Conquest, and Revelations that Nintendo sent me, the latest trio of Fire Emblem games that I beat on my 3DS. I can't recommend these enough, even to those of you that have never played a game in the series. It's really worth getting into and pretty approachable too. So that pretty much covers my physical 3DS games. I have them all in this little case that I got from Club Nintendo a few years ago. But now let's move on to my digital games. I'm very organized when it comes to my digital collection, so I like to organize my games by platform. So this is my 3DS collection. Oh wait, let me zoom out a bit. Okay, that's my 3DS collection. So for the first part of my digital collection, I have all my digital retail 3DS games. We have some Mario games like New Super Mario Bros. 2, the platformer sequel to the original New Super Mario Bros. On the DS. There's also Paper Mario Sticker Star, not the most popular entry in the series, mostly for the battle system, but still a great game I enjoyed. There's also the sequel to Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, along with some new puzzles and a new multiplayer mode. This game was a blast from the past. Fire Emblem Awakening was my first real entry into the Fire Emblem series aside from Radiant Dawn, and what really got me into the series. This entry is great for newcomers to the RTS series, and especially if you want to learn more about Robin, Chrom, and Lucina in Smash Bros. Tomodachi Life was another fun game that I played for about a month, and literally this is all I played for that month. It's sort of a life simulation game that uses your Miis. You can even find a taste of it in the Miitomo app for iOS and Android. I also have a duo of Pokemon games, Pokemon X and Pokemon Omega Ruby. Although I'm not as much into Pokemon as I used to be in the Diamond and Pearl era, I still pick up at least one new entry in the series whenever there is one. Now the last retail digital game I bought was Hyrule Warriors Legends, a surprisingly really good port of the Wii U game, at least if you have one of the new 3DS models. After my retail games, I have my system applications in one folder titled Other, and this holds pretty much Mii Maker and my activity log. The only other applications I have outside of that are the Nintendo eShop for buying games, Miiverse for getting my puzzle pieces, and the system settings application. After that, I have a mini category of 3D classics from Nintendo. These are retro games that were remade to take advantage of the 3DS's 3D effect. The games I have are Kirby's Adventure, Excitebike, Urban Champion, Kid Icarus, and Xevious. My personal favorites being Kirby's Adventure and Kid Icarus. Having played both a lot as a kid, I absolutely love these games. After the 3D classics, I have my downloadable 3DS games. These mostly consist of indie games and a few free-to-play games. Some of these are also organized by the series and developer if I have multiple entries of a series or multiple games from the same developer. So for example, I have all my 3DS digital Pokemon games lined up. These consist of Pokemon Shuffle, Pokemon Rumble World, Pokemon Dream Radar, and the Pokédex 3D. Honestly, I haven't used any of these in a very long time, therefore most of them require updates. Next, I have a fun little adventure game that almost looks like a 3D classic called Ika-chan. It's a water level themed adventure game that makes great use of the 3D on the 3DS. After that, I have Dimpamen. This is an augmented reality game that has you capture little creatures called Dimpamen. It's essentially what Pokemon Go will be, but for the 3DS. I also have a pair of games in a series called Gunman Clive. These beautiful Western-inspired platform shooters mimic the gameplay of a classic Mega Man game. They also have a unique sketched out artwork to them, so they look beautiful in 3D. I'm pretty sure you can find them for pretty cheap on the eShop as well, so I highly recommend picking them up. Next to them is the Mighty Switch Force series, another favorite of mine. These games are made by WayForward and are puzzle platformers. The first game has you collect escaped convicts from jail, while the sequel puts you in the position of being a firewoman putting out some flames. Both use the 3D effect to create interesting looking scenarios for puzzles, so I highly recommend checking them out if you're a fan of the platformer series. Next we have Bike Rider DX. That's essentially the gameplay of the Runner series but with a stick figure on a bike. Then there's Steel Driver, which was at one point a full retail game from Nintendo but eventually became free to play. Next we have the Pushmo series. It's a series of puzzle games consisting of Pushmo, Pushmo 2, and Crashmo. These games have you control an adorable little Pushmo as he tries to save the children hidden in the cube structures. Using the 3D gameplay, you must determine a way to get to the top of the structure to save the day. It's a really fun series, and if you're a fan of Intelligent Systems work, I highly recommend it. After that, I have a series of games from Renegade Kid. These games are Bomb Monkey, a fun little puzzle game that has you match different colored boxes and then blow them up with bombs. Mutant Mudds is a retro-themed platformer that uses the 3D effect along with the gameplay that switches between the foreground and the background. ATV Wild Ride 3D is a multiplayer racing game with online gameplay, so if you want a really cool little online racer that's not Mario Kart 7, here's a good one. Lastly, we have Moon Chronicles. That's the first-person episodic shooter, but I've only really played the first level. It was pretty enjoyable though. After that, we have Zombie Slayer Deox, which is a Guitar Hero clone that plays music along with some beat-up gameplay. Colors 3D is an awesome drawing application that uses the layer system like Photoshop to create 3D artwork that you can share online. If you love drawing, buy this without a question. Birdie Mania 3D is an endless runner that has you control a bird in the sky trying to dodge obstacles. Rusty's Real Deal Baseball is... let's just move on. Vector Racing is a vector-themed racer. It's very basic, no power-ups or anything, just floor it pretty much and try to get as many speed pads as you can. Kokoto Alien Break is an alien-themed brick breaker game, and that's pretty much about it. Night Sky is a really charming physics puzzle game where you control a dark orb across multiple platformed areas. Art of Balance has you balance different shapes on the platform while trying to keep them from falling over in forms of different puzzles. I also have Ollie Ollie, Steamroll Dig, a fantastic title by the way, played this a lot on the Wii U. All of these came with my Nintendo Humble Bundle I believe. Lastly, I also have a free-to-play version of Ironfall, a technical representation of what the 3DS hardware is capable of. Now that pretty much wraps up my digital games. Now we're moving on to the Virtual Console. First off, I have the 3D classic Sonic the Hedgehog for the Sega Genesis, but now with 3D gameplay for the 3DS. Actually, from my experience of playing, Sega does 3D classics way better than Nintendo, giving the consumer much more options of customizing the way the game looks. After that, I have all my Sega Game Gear games, which are pretty much all Sonic games. Sonic Triple Trouble, Sonic the Hedgehog, and Sonic the Hedgehog 2. After my Game Gear games, I have my Super Nintendo game, which is only really one, Super Mario World, one of my favorite 2D Mario games of all time. After my Super Nintendo games, I have my NES collection. I have Super Mario Bros. 1, I skipped out on 2 and got the Japanese Lost levels instead, Mario Bros. 3, another personal favorite of mine. I also picked up Legend of Zelda 1 and 2, Metroid, Mega Man 1, the original Punch-Out without Mike Tyson, but just as good. Then there's also a few well-known NES classics, like Balloon Fight, Ice Climber, Donkey Kong Jr., NES Open, Wrecking Crew, and finally Yoshi. And that pretty much wraps it for my NES games. Everything else are handheld games starting with my Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. I have 2 Game Boy Color games, both really big favorites of mine, Pokemon Yellow and The Legend of Zelda: A Link's Awakening DX. Being able to play these masterpieces on my new handheld is a blast, and the little effect of being able to have a Game Boy frame around them and the native resolution is pretty awesome. Now on the Game Boy side, I have Tetris, all 3 Super Mario Land games, Metroid 2, Kirby's Dream Land, one of my favorite Kirby games of all time next to Crystal Shards, the original Pac-Man, and lastly Mario's Picross and Kirby's Pinball Land. I also have a handful of Game Boy Advance games. These were actually given to me by Nintendo for the 3DS Ambassador program. I have Kirby and the Amazing Mirror, Fire Emblem, The Sacred Stones, Yoshi's Island, Super Mario Advance 3, Mario Kart Super Circuit, F-Zero Maximum Velocity, Metroid Fusion, The Legend of Zelda The Minish Cap, WarioWare Inc., and finally Mario and Donkey Kong. Lastly, I have my Dsiware Library that I transferred over from my original DSi. These games are Dr. Mario Express, Bomberman Blitz, one of my favorite Dsiware games of all time, Legend of Zelda 4 Swords I believe was given to me for free, Photo Dojo, something I spent way too much playing as a kid, Birds and Beams from WarioWare, Mario vs. Donkey Kong The Minis March Again, Army Defender, WarioWare Snap, Guitar Rock Tour, Faces, Game & Watch, DK Jr., Glory Days, and 2 Mario applications for time and calculating math. And lastly, to wrap up my collection, I have one folder with every single demo I've ever downloaded for my 3DS. And that pretty much wraps it up for what's on my new 3DS XL. Be sure to let me know what your collection looks like in the comment section below, and if there's something you really recommend me checking out. If you enjoyed the video, please show me by smashing that like button and subscribing for more video game content like this. As always, all my social network usernames are in the description below, along with my gaming names and my friend codes, which are all in the description. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Later.